And you're listening to Moody Radio 89.3. This is Mornings with Eric and Brigitte.
And we are in a special week. We are in Holy Week, and really the events of which have been prophesied for generations. But this is the day and this is the week we get to celebrate what was accomplished on the cross and, of course, at that empty tomb. And to help us do that today, Pastor Bill Schott is in studio from Calvary Chapel. Thank you so much for being here. I know you've got a lot on your plate, especially on a week like this. We appreciate your time.
Oh, it's my pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
It's interesting how there are people that dispute a lot of what is said in the Gospels. There's a lot, though, that when it comes to the death of Jesus, that it's undisputable, right?
Yeah, in fact, we have one of the greatest scholars of our time who did research on 1,400 scholarly works. He researched in the 90s and the 80s 1,400 of the most critical scholarly works on the resurrection of Christ. And what he came up with were 12 things that they all agree on, from the most liberal to the most conservative scholars. So these are things that we can kind of bank on. And when we bank on these things, we realize that these false theories that come to us don't have a lot of ground to stand on. So one of those is that they all agree Jesus died by Roman crucifixion. He was buried, most likely in a private tomb. The disciples were discouraged and bereaved about this. Jesus' tomb was found empty very soon after his burial. The disciples had experiences that they believed were actual appearances of the risen Christ, and those appearances changed their lives. They switched worship from Saturday to Sunday. They stopped sacrificing animals. I mean, that's serious business for Jewish men to not do that anymore. They must have learned something about what happened to Jesus. The proclamation of the resurrection took place very shortly after the event. The gospel message centered on the preaching of the resurrection. So they based all of their message based on that. So never mind the teachings on love and charity and justice and everything else. They centered it on he's risen from the dead, and that's why we want to listen to him. So we have this critical study done over many, many, many years, over many, many different critical studies that say there's total agreement on all of that. So now as we approach these false theories, we can have that as a bar to measure this all against.
Right, because there's agreement. Okay, we know he died. We know he was buried. We know the tomb is empty. But then there might be theories of to what exactly happened. So let's dive into some of those. One is the hallucination theory.
Yeah, so the hallucination theory states that when the apostles claimed to have seen the risen Christ, that they were hallucinating. But the major problem with that theory is there were 12 resurrection appearances, and most of them involved multiple people, including one of them involving over 500 people at once. So all of the psychological experts in this area deny any sort of possibility of mass hallucination, where a group of people are all having the same hallucination at once. And you'd have to have that happening multiple times. So something we've never seen in history, the hallucination theory would say happened multiple times in the first century, all about the same hallucination of the risen Christ, but at different locations and at different times in front of different groups. So it becomes harder to believe that than to simply believe in all of the prophecy of the Old Testament predicting it, especially Jesus himself saying how many times I will rise on the third day.
Is this basically saying that they saw a hologram? Is that kind of what the hallucination theory is saying, that these people saw this person in front of them?
Yeah, hologram. I think if you're in the Star Wars era, maybe Star Trek era, but yes, some sort of appearance that's you can't even say that it's a spiritual body because they're saying it's all in their mind. So it's nothing that's actually happening. It's something that's being imagined, and they're all imagining the same thing. So if you showed up at church on Sunday and you said, I had a dream last night, and the person you said I had the same dream, you'd be like, that is unheard of.
Right.
But then if the next person says, I did too, and it turns out the whole church had the same dream, you would go, wait a minute, this never happened before. This is something freaky's happening. Well, the same with hallucinations. Those are just daytime dreams. So,
but the fact is, even at that, the tomb was still empty, right?
That's the center point of everything. because all you have to do, if the hallucination theory is true, is go to the tomb and see the corpse. And that has never been able to be done. Nobody has produced any evidence of a body of Jesus, and that'd be the most sought-after body in history. Right. And you know the religious leaders would have paraded that corpse through downtown Jerusalem, and we would have never heard the name Jesus of Nazareth if they did that.
But what about someone who says, but, they went to the wrong tomb? That's the answer.
Yeah, I love that one because, growing up when I did, watching Bugs Bunny, he pops up and says, I should have made a left turn at Albuquerque.
Right.
That's the apostles, right? Uh-huh. It's like, they're supposed to make a right, they make a left, they go to the wrong tomb, and the most significant movement in human history happens because they made a wrong turn, type of thing. When that means the corpse of Christ is still in the right tomb. And Joseph of Arimathea knows exactly where that tomb is. It's his tomb. And so Pilate had that tomb guarded. So there's so many people that know precisely the location of this tomb. And for them to never go back to the correct tomb is just, again, harder to believe than the truth.
So were the Roman soldiers at the wrong tomb also? I mean, they could go on with this forever. I mean,
yeah.
The angels went to the wrong tomb, and whoops, we got the wrong guy. I mean, there's a lot of weird things with this one, isn't there?
So I think it's important for people to know that these are the published countering theories. And so these aren't just like, the crazy guy on the street saying it. These are the published ones. And this is critical scholarship's best efforts to deny the resurrection. And so you can see that their best efforts are, you literally need more blind faith to believe it than simply saying he rose from the dead.
All right, the next one's the swoon theory. Explain this one to us.
This one I think they try to hold on to the most. And the swoon theory simply says Jesus didn't actually die on the cross, he just passed out. And so he entered into a coma-like state, and 3 days later he awoke from his coma on the cool of the tomb and all of that. So major problems with that theory is, number one, the Romans know how to execute a man. They've never known to have left a man alive that could survive their crucifixion. Number two, he was embalmed and covered in about 75 pounds of spices, of myrrh and various spices. And he would have been like swaddled, like a baby is swaddled. They would mummify him. So they would crisscross his arms and legs, wrap him very tightly in these burial cloths, put all these massive amounts of spices on him. And from that position, Jesus, not being supernatural, because if all these theories are, the only reason for these theories is to say that Jesus is not the Son of God, then just being a normal man after the whippings, after the nails, after the massive blood loss, would have to somehow in a Houdini fashion get out of these bandages. And then he'd have to move a 2,000-pound stone out of the entranceway of the tomb. He would have to overcome the Roman guards. And then he'd have to appear to his apostles as somebody that just conquered death, when instead he would need serious medical attention. So that's that theory. And that's just, again, not very likely.
That's kind of supernatural too, though. I mean, if you were able to do all of that, I mean, that
you'd want to worship that guy,
yeah.
Right? Yeah,
that's never happened either, though.
Yes.
That's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
What about the theory of the disciples actually stealing the body?
So that one, we actually read about that conspiracy beginning in our New Testament. When Pilate's gathering with the Roman guards and so forth, he tells them, say you fell asleep and the apostles stole the body during the night, and I'll cover your tracks for you and all of that. So this is the one that people try to run with as the New Testament actually claims it. But what they're missing is the context of Pilate scrambling to figure out how to explain the resurrection. He knows that these guards were not incompetent in their job. They know that he knows something happened. His wife warned him. He said, I have nothing to do with this righteous man. I've suffered much over him in a dream today. So she knows there's something about him. And so now what would be the implications of them stealing the body? Well, for the rest of their lives, 3-4 decades of their lives, they get nothing but beaten, jailed, tortured, and eventually executed. This is not some book tour they go on, becoming famous and rich from this. If you think jail is miserable, they went often. If you think getting beat up is miserable. That happened to him often. And eventually they had to hear, we're sentencing you to death. Some got shot with arrows. Some got penetrated with a spear. Some were crucified. Some were beheaded. And not one of them takes back the story. So many people out there probably heard of Chuck Colson, part of the Watergate scandal. That started the Colson Center, and he got saved in jail and all of that. Well, Chuck Colson tells the story of how there were 12 of his guys that were covering for President Nixon. And when the media started turning on to them about what's up here, guys, he says within 3 weeks, we couldn't keep the secret. We couldn't keep the lie. The pressure of just public ridicule and jail made us say, no, we're telling the truth here. He says, so for me to believe that these 12 guys could tell a lie that led to permanent suffering, permanent beatings, permanent ridicule, and they were separated. They were divided all over the world. They weren't together supporting each other. They couldn't text each other support or anything like that. They're on their own by themselves, receiving all of that. And when they're sentenced to death, they'd rather die than change any part of their story. So we just have to face the fact that everybody's behaving in ways under tremendous pressure that gives them every reason to change the story, even if the story's real. But they don't change the story because the story's real, and they attribute so much importance to the story that they'd rather suffer and die than mislead anybody on it.
Well, and before the crucifixion, there was no indication that those guys would hold to a story. They struggled to figure all this out and stand by him even before the resurrection.
Yes, and everything they say about Jesus and the implications of the resurrection is not a part of their Jewish understanding. This is new to them. They believed in one end times resurrection. They didn't think of it as individually as you die. A lot changed for them. Their day of worship, no more sacrifices, everything changed for them. And so one of Jesus' struggles in the 3 years he's training these guys is they often don't understand. So for them to go from not understanding to holding to a story so strongly even unto death, the best and easiest to believe explanation is that they saw him risen from the dead. So we know Jesus actually died because why didn't they break his legs like they broke the other two criminals' legs? Because they knew he was already dead. So almost like roadkill, they poke at him into his heart, where even if he was still alive, now he's got a spear wound to the heart. So the expertise of the Romans on crucifixion didn't give him any chance. The confirmation of his death through the spear wound to the heart and the 36 or so hours in a tomb with all that blood loss all matches what Jesus said would happen.
How does the fact that we are part of the church even today prove the resurrection also? The fact that the church continues on?
Yeah, so, Christians have been persecuted endlessly since the first century. I think the 20th century was the most martyrdom Christianity has ever seen, so it's not let up, it's only increased. And yet, all the places where martyrdom is concentrated is where the church grows the most. So it defies the logic of our persecutors. Hey, if we kill these Christians, we'll end this movement. But all that's happened for 20 centuries is that, as we say, the blood of the martyrs is the seed of the church. The more they kill us, the more it grows, which is anti-logical, right? Yeah. It doesn't make any sense. It has to be supernatural. Certainly killing the followers of a movement should slow down, reduce, or end that movement. But Christianity keeps on growing through all of that. So, in Islam, they use the sword to promote their religion, and it grows. And they'll point to their growth and say, look at this. Look how God is blessing our movement. But Christianity grows at an even greater rate while having the sword used against it. So it's defying all natural reason. And when natural reason is defied, you have to resort to supernatural reasons. There has to be a supernatural reason for all of this.
And the supernatural reason we know is that he rose again. And that's something we obviously celebrate this Sunday. But what difference does that make for the person today listening who's driving, who's never made that connection in their own life?
Yes. So Resurrection, I always say everybody likes to wear crosses around their necks, but I think we should wear empty tombs because that's really where the story is. And what it means to everybody driving in their cars right now is simply this. There never has to be a goodbye in Christianity. There's only, I'll see you later. And that later that we will see our deceased loved ones is nothing like this earthly experience with, well, if you're driving, the traffic you're experiencing now. It's the fullness of joy and the fullness of beauty and the fullness of happiness forever and ever. Because you can't have fullness of joy if death is around the corner at some point. We have to be free from death. So if we read the account in Revelation 21 where the Apostle John gets a view of heaven, he talks about our loved ones who have passed away, and he says there's no more crying, there's no more tears, there's no more suffering, there's no more pain, there's no more death. He says because the former things have passed away. And so what I would share with everybody is when we say our loved ones passed away, we should probably say they passed onward and upward rather than away. Because the Bible doesn't say they passed away. It says their death passed away. They'll never experience that again. Their sorrow passed away. They will never experience that again. Their pain, if it's cancer or whatnot, that suffering is gone forever. But they did not pass away. They moved on without the cancer. So when I go to a bedside and pray for healing, and it doesn't look good on this side of heaven, I'll share with them, you will be healed. I don't know on which side of heaven, but you'll be whole and complete and without cancer forever and ever and ever. And so that's the hope that empty tomb brings to each and every one who believes. That's the only condition given, is simply to believe.
And that's why we slow down this week and remember that empty tomb. Remember what he has done on our behalf and then celebrate on Sunday the glorious resurrection. And if none of this is connected with you yet, maybe none of this has made that understanding, we would love to get you more information about who Jesus is, how he can change your life, and how you can look forward to Resurrection Sunday happening this Sunday. So if you want to find out more, we would encourage you to text the word Jesus, 561-737-6035. We'll send you some things to read, a video to watch, and even a phone number to call if you'd like to talk to somebody.
And I also want to point you, if you want more of this type of studies, Pastor Bill Schott has a website full of them, and we have a link to Charcoal Fire Bible Study right at our website, ericandbrigitte.org. Pastor Bill, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.